A whole ton of new swing state polls have just been released for the 2024 election between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, so we also have the new corresponding polling averages in key battleground states. And so in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the 2024 electoral map based on current polling averages from all of the competitive states and see where Harris and Trump stand on the path to 270. We'll begin on the West Coast and fill in the states of Washington, Oregon, and California, three traditionally blue states that are on track to go to the vice president this November. Nevada, though, is going to be a lot more competitive. Joe Biden carried the silver state in 2020 by a margin of 2.4%. Today, though, the former president is on track to winning Nevada by a 9-point margin, according to an average of the three polls conducted between Trump and Harris. In fact, according to a poll that was conducted just 10 days ago, Donald Trump leads Kamala Harris by 10%, 50-40. So as of right now, the silver state is on track to flip in favor of former President Trump by a likely margin. Arizona is on track to go to Trump as well, with the former president leading by 6.4% statewide. This was a state that Joe Biden carried in the last election by 0.31% after Hillary Clinton lost it to Trump 4 years prior by 3.5%. Today, Arizona is on track to easily go back into the Republican column. 6.4% is a pretty substantial margin, and Trump has led in every single poll so far conducted between him and Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris hasn't even gone within 5% in any of the 5 surveys conducted over the past year. And so the state of Arizona will also be likely Republican. The vice president is off to a pretty poor start, considering that now that she's lost Arizona and Nevada, the only way she can get to 270 electoral votes is by winning Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which right now seems pretty unlikely, and we'll go over the numbers up there in the Midwest momentarily. But just right off the bat, Nevada and Arizona both being likely Republican for Donald Trump is a very good sign for the former president's campaign. Before we continue, only 10% of you guys are actually subscribed, so please take the time to subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November. And follow me on Twitter for daily political updates, link in the description below. We're now going to fill in many of the states in the middle of the country that will be safe Republican for a third time in a row. Donald Trump is going to easily win the states of Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, North and South Dakota, all of Nebraska except for the 2nd District, which is lean Republican, as well as Kansas and Oklahoma. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris is the favorite in both Colorado and New Mexico, two states that Joe Biden carried by double-digit margins in 2020, Colorado by 14 points, New Mexico by 10.8. Now this election, though, things are going to get closer. These two states are probably going to be decided by single-digit margins, but Kamala Harris nevertheless remains the favorite to win both Colorado and New Mexico in 2024. We also have a new poll from Texas. This was conducted earlier this year. Donald Trump leads by 13%. Not much has changed since then. Texas will be a red state. There's no doubt about that. The former president won the Lone Star State by 5 points in 2020, and this was when the Biden campaign thought they had a chance at flipping it. They put hundreds of millions of dollars into advertising in Texas, and they still lost by a likely margin. The Lone Star State this election is probably going to be either solid or likely Republican. It's going to be on that cusp around a 12-point margin. We're really just going to have to wait and see. Alaska and Hawaii, though, are going to be pretty solid for their respective parties. Alaska is, of course, Republican, and Hawaii will vote blue. We're now going to move on to the eastern half of the continental U.S., where most of the swing states are. On the western half, we really only have Nevada and Arizona. But in the Midwest, we have the state of Minnesota, a state that hasn't voted Republican since 1972. Joe Biden won it by 7 points, Hillary Clinton by 1.5, and it is a state that Republicans could win this November. If Joe Biden hadn't dropped out of the election, Donald Trump would probably win Minnesota this time around. However, With Harris out in the race, she is performing slightly better. She leads Trump by 6% statewide. I know the page looks a little bit old here, but this is a recent poll conducted just a few days ago by Fox News. Kamala Harris leads by 6% in the only poll between Trump and Harris from Minnesota so far. So the state is going to be likely Democratic, but is probably going to be a lot more competitive in the very end. We also have polling from Wisconsin and a polling average that shows Trump leading by 0.7%. The 4 latest polls have shown the state to be very close, 2 of them conducted after Biden dropped out. One of them from Emerson College showed a tie, and the other had Trump leading by 1%. So on average, Wisconsin is very, very close, but Republicans do maintain a very slight lead. If you compare this though to where Biden was 4 years ago, Joe Biden led by 6.4% at this point in Wisconsin during this part of the cycle, and in the end, he led by 6.7%, but only won by 0.7%. That is how much polling in Wisconsin overestimated Democrats in the last election. So the fact that Trump is even ahead right now really says a lot about just how much better he is performing just overall compared to 4 years ago. So Wisconsin is going to be tilt Republican, which is concerning because Kamala Harris has to win Wisconsin, and not just that, but also Michigan and Pennsylvania if she wants to even have a shot at winning the White House. And before we get to Michigan and Pennsylvania, we're going to fill in the rest of the Midwest, which is going to be a lot less competitive. Indiana is, of course, going to go to Trump. It's going to be a solid red state, while Illinois will be solid for Kamala Harris. Iowa and Ohio, though, these 2 states were likely for Trump in the last 2 elections, but considering just how much they've shifted to the right over the last few years, undoubtedly, Donald Trump is the favorite to win, and he's going to win them by solid margins. J.D. Vance, a senator from Ohio, is Trump's running mate. That's obviously going to boost the former president there. But Iowa, I mean, it elected its Republican governor for a second time in 2022 by nearly 20 points. Same margin in Ohio. These are solid red states now. There's no doubt about it, even though they were among the most competitive in the 1990s and the early 2000s. And now to finish off the Midwest, in Michigan and Pennsylvania, 2 critical states for the Harris campaign. We're going to begin in the Wolverine state, where Donald Trump leads by 1% in the polling average. We have 2 polls that have been conducted since Biden dropped out. One of them shows Trump leading by 1%. This was conducted by Emerson College, and the other one shows a tie between the 2 candidates. This poll conducted by Fox News. And so with Trump leading by 1 point on average, things are getting pretty dire for Kamala Harris. If you look at where Democrats were at this point 4 years ago, Joe Biden was leading by 8 points in late July of 2020. So Kamala Harris really is doing a lot worse than Biden was in the last election. And also you have to consider the fact that polls also overestimated Democrats in Michigan in 2020, just like they did in Wisconsin. So right now, the Wolverine state is going to be lean Republican, a big blow to the Harris camp. Pennsylvania will also go to the GOP, at least based on the current polling average. Donald Trump leads by a staggering 3 points, and Pennsylvania is arguably the most important out of the 3 Rust Belt states because it does have the most electoral votes, 19, as opposed to Michigan's 15 and Wisconsin's 10. According to the 2 new polls we've gotten since Joe Biden dropped out, one of them shows a tie. This poll conducted by Fox News, and an Emerson College poll has the former president leading by 2%. So more just not what we're wanting to see if it were the Harris campaign. The numbers simply are not good for the vice president. Pennsylvania is on track to be Republican as well, and with basically the entire Midwest red, it is looking pretty unlikely that Kamala Harris is going to have any path whatsoever to 270 electoral votes. Moving up to the Northeast now, we're going to fill in the solid blue states of New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and the District of Columbia. Yes, New York and New Jersey could get competitive. It could go into that likely range, but there's still states that Harris is almost guaranteed to win, and in this video, we're just going to focus on those more competitive races. We have one in New Hampshire, where the vice president leads by 6.5% on average. This is down from Biden's 7.5% victory in 2020, although it is better than how Clinton performed 8 years ago when she almost lost the Granite State to Donald Trump winning it by just 0.37%. Now, what we're seeing right now in many of these states is a lot of increased support for Democrats and enthusiasm for Kamala Harris because she replaced probably one of the worst nominees in the last 30 years, that of course being Joe Biden. And so as a result of that, we are seeing Kamala Harris do much better than Biden in many of these early polls. But as time goes on, that enthusiasm is going to die down just like it did for Biden over the last 4 years. And so yes, Harris leads by 6.5% in New Hampshire right now, but I do not expect this margin to last. But on our map, for the time being, the state of New Hampshire will be likely Democratic, while we also have some polls from up in Maine. The first district is obviously going to be solid blue, the second district solid red, but the state as a whole is currently expected to go to Harris by 9%. I mean, again, this margin probably isn't going to last, but for right now, Maine is also going to be likely Democratic. It's on track to vote pretty similarly to how it did in 2020. We're now going to finish off the map in the Southeast, where Donald Trump is the favorite to win in Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and South Carolina. Virginia, though, is going to be a lot more competitive. Trump was actually the favorite to win the state before Joe Biden dropped out. Trump actually took the lead in the polling average, but with Harris replacing Biden, she leads by 5 points in a state that Joe Biden carried by double that margin 4 years ago. So Virginia right now is just barely going to be a likely blue state on this map, but it could definitely still get a lot more competitive. North Carolina is on track to being likely as well, but instead for Donald Trump, with the former president leading by 9 points, according to the only poll we have between the former president and the vice president. This poll conducted by Emerson College and The Hill back in February. North Carolina is a state that was relatively competitive in 2020, going to Donald Trump by just 1.3%, although in 2016 he won it by 3.7%, and we're probably going to see him win the Tar Heel state by more than 5 this time around. North Carolina is going to be likely Republican. Democrats don't really have too much of a chance in the state this election. We're now left with just Georgia and Florida. Georgia actually went to Biden in the last election, going to the now president by 0.24%, the narrowest margin possible. Kamala Harris is not Joe Biden in 2020. Kamala Harris is not going to perform nearly as well as the incumbent president did in the last election, basically anywhere. And considering the fact that Joe Biden was in a very good position to win, the fact that he won Georgia by such a small margin basically guarantees that Trump is going to flip it back this time around, and that is what the polling is telling us. Donald Trump leads by 4.5% on average in the state of Georgia. The two polls conducted since Harris became the nominee both show Trump in the lead. And so the Peach State is going to be lean Republican, while in Florida, we of course know that Trump is going to win. Florida is no longer a competitive state, and the Sunshine State is currently expected to go to Trump by a double-digit 10-point margin, according to a poll conducted just 10 days ago. Florida is going to be likely Republican. And so according to current polling averages from the battleground states, Donald Trump is on track to win 313 electoral votes to Kamala Harris's 225, which would be the worst Democratic performance since 1988. That'll be it for this video. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election in November, and join my Discord server, link in the description below.